Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Rebecca and I'm the event planner of the Microsoft Reactor New York. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly just review two items, our code of conduct and our event guidelines. So the Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and our presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but we just ask that you're mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. This session will be recorded. It's available on demand through the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel in about 48 to 72 hours. I'll share the link in the chat for our Reactor playlist if you're not familiar. If you have not been on a live stream through YouTube before, please know that you must create an account on YouTube to have access and to interact in the chat. If you're not able to do so now, you can always send us a message at a later date if you have questions that you want answered on this session. At this time, we are on today's session. So the Reactor is joined by Jenn and Skyler once again for their third session in their Funkiest series. In today's workshop, we'll be continuing on with creating their web UI. This session will run for about 60 minutes with time for questions throughout. If you have not done so already, I just dropped into the chat our check-in link and the event ID to get those resources, 14722. So now I will bring our speakers up. Oops. There we go. Hello, welcome. Welcome back for another session. Woo. Here we are again. So I'm also going to share in the chat links to the previous session. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll drop that there and you can check that out at a later time. Again, all of this is on demand. So if you aren't able to stay for the entirety of this session, you can always tune in at a later time once it's up on our YouTube. So from here, I'll let you guys take over.
Thanks. Thanks, Rebecca. I'm Jen, and we have Skyler, even though Skyler doesn't look like it's a photo.
I'm missing my beard. This is always a terrible decision whenever I do this. It's like, no, why? But here I am, nonetheless.
But, when I first saw you, I was like, is that really you? Yeah, it does look like you, kind of, but it's still you.
It's still me.
Yeah. So how are you doing today, Skyler?
Not bad. Yeah, not bad. I am, it's very bright where I'm at right now, but otherwise I'm doing well. How about you, Jen? How's life?
It's doing well. The years passed by really quick. I can't believe we're on our third episode too. It's been a lot of fun. So I'm like, we're thinking about all these ideas for the next ones. I'm like, okay, what's the next thing we're gonna do? And I just feel like, I don't know, energized for things. Yeah,
no, I totally agree. It was funny. I was thinking this morning as I was kind of refreshing myself on the scenario and the things that we're doing. You know, I'm a program manager right now at Microsoft, but I was a developer in my past life, and doing all this stuff is like, oh yeah, I really love doing development. And I was like, and I was like, no, I should probably stick with what I'm doing right now. But it's been really fun to make these episodes. So
yeah, and I mean, I guess I was not really a developer per se. I've never done formal developing, but I was like creating solutions and doing things with Alexa, and I love doing the hands-on. I love talking about the technical stuff. So being in marketing, I wanted to learn the business, but now I'm like, oh, this is why I get energized, because I get to do this stuff and really get to learn and talk with other technical people and really help people understand these complex things.
Yeah, totally agree.
Especially this day and age. Next time you have to teach me about quantum if you can. That'd be really cool.
Oh yeah, go into the quantum space.
Yeah, so a lot of that. Cool. So let's see. Our agenda today, we're gonna do a recap for sure about what we talked about in the last episode. It's kind of a continuation of that one. But I was also talking with you earlier about like if you kind of could help explain like the formats of a REST API, just so that because I always get confused about like what methods are, what endpoints are, and like what the different actions you can do. So and I know there's different ways to do it. It just, I'm like, am I using the right terminology? And when I'm trying to describe it to someone and then they get confused probably, but maybe you can help me with that a bit.
I found a really decent tutorial that I liked. So we can definitely talk about that a little bit and then kind of head into the episode. This is probably really small, but and honestly, I'm not going to reference this that much. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about kind of what we mean when we say API, as well as what it means in this kind of context. Don't get too focused on the text here, but generally, like when the kind of like dominant path that HTTP endpoints, HTTP APIs, I should rather, have kind of gone down is really like the REST API path. And there's a bunch of resources out there online to learn about REST APIs. There's some pretty distinct methodologies that people suggest that you use, but everybody has different flavors and different ways and different parts they take of this. But I do think that kind of some of the most common, the kind of common methods that are used in the API world when we talk about REST and HTTP are things like REST verbs. And what this means is that it literally is like the actual method that corresponds to the HTTP request. So the typical ones are a GET request, which is like retrieving data from something, right? Typically from a database or some sort of location. There is a POST request, which is typically used to insert data or to create a new record in a database or something akin to that. It's kind of the create REST verb that you use associated with your API. Then there is put, which is like a modify, so modifying a value of some sort. And then there is delete. There's also patch, and there's actually a bunch of other ones as well. But those are kind of the most. Those are those actually those four with delete at the last one. Like those are the common ones because they so frequently correspond to common operations, right, that you want to do, right? You want to put something somewhere, you want to modify something, you want to delete something, you want to retrieve something. It's just really easy logically to kind of to wrap your brain around that. So kind of bringing it back into our context. So those are like the REST verbs, right? The actual HTTP methods: get, put, post, delete. Putting it back into kind of our parlance, like with things like functions and function apps. Well, the nice thing is that you can actually map a function kind of one-to-one to a REST verb. So when you go and create an API, like you can literally go create a function that is a function that is an HTTP function that does a GET request, or a function that is an HTTP function that does a POST request. And you can map these things one-to-one, so you can have these really intuitive APIs that map really well to the REST verbs, and then you can just deploy them, and then you know everything is copacetic, and life is really great. And that's what we're doing basically with that's what we did, I should say, with the previous episode where we created the web API. Is we had a POST request, and then we also have a GET request now. So
could you pull up the website that we had last time?
Yes, I can pull up. Let's see. I think this is the
original one.
Yes. So this is like the finished. This is like the finished product, right? That like.
Could you zoom in a bit? Sorry.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for keeping me honest here. Is that good?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Yeah. So just for reference, this is like the finished product we're going to get to over the course of the session today. I certainly hope so. I'm pretty confident we will this time around. Yeah. And it allows you to increment and decrement. These buttons actually correspond to a when you click it, an HTTP request will be made. And then actually when you refresh this page, it is dynamically pulling that value out of a database with a GET request.
That's your GET, yeah. So is your decrement and increment, would those be put or not delete, right?
Those would actually be, so, okay, I think technically, so I'm cheating here, I apologize, because again, it's kind of variable, but I think I'm actually using a POST request to basically modify the data in the database. But if you wanted to be more appropriate, you could change that to like a put as you are modifying that, yes. Okay. But what I want to quickly show, and this is gonna, I wonder if I can, oh cool, I can make this bigger. So let's just go ahead and refresh this.
And this is, you're looking at the inspect, what's it, inspect?
Yeah, this is the
inspect, like you right click and inspect, right?
Yeah, this is like the inspect tool within Microsoft Edge. And so I'm under the network tab on the same website that I had up before. And I just wanted to show, again, like you can go and kind of interrogate the requests that were made within the website. And so this is the get score. You can, it's really small. It's hard to see the kind of hovering text, but this corresponds to, hold on a second, that's
you can actually see the actual request and the response.
Yeah, so this is because on the page load, right? If we'll go back to the code and we'll show that in a second here as we get back into this. But we make a request to a specific API endpoint that goes and retrieves that data. In this case, we retrieve back 150 from the CosmosDB database in the form of a JSON object here. So this is a really simple JSON object. It's literally just has one property, data.
Well, it doesn't need to be complicated, right? Like it does this. You want it to do a specific thing. You have too many things in there, then you're having to pretty much parse through and find what you're looking for.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Totally. Yep. Totally agree. So you can see that we're doing a GET request here, and the function app is configured in such a way to expect that and then return the data back out. So yeah. Any other questions on that front, Jen, or should we get into the actual implementation world now?
No, that's great. Thank you. It's good to kind of baseline. I'm like, are we speaking the same language? Is usually how it goes, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll try to stay consistent with my language throughout, but sometimes I do get tripped up as we go along. So I'll try to just keep me honest. Cool.
Hey, you're not the only one. I think everyone gets confused. So it's just good to talk about it and say, hey, it's okay to get confused. Just make sure you're when you're talking with someone else that you ask them, like, are we talking about the same thing?
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. Okay, cool. So just one quick thing. If anybody is like new or hasn't watched the previous episodes, if you do want to follow along, Microsoft Reactor, Funkiest API, and YouTube, or go to the Microsoft Reactor website, you can see this is episode 1, building a web API, and then the first part of what we're talking about today was over here. So just for additional context.
It's really weird to watch myself on a video.
Oh yeah,
while I'm on a.
It's like a bit of like Inception-y kind of stuff going on here. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to close this down now, though. Okay, so cool. Let's go ahead and flip into the the real pieces of this. So I just want to do a quick reminder that we started building this using an Azure Static Web App. This is the tutorial that we were following along with to deploy our initial app. I'm not sure if we can throw this. Can we throw this link somehow into the chat, Jen? I might be able to do that.
No, I can do it.
I've got it.
You got it? Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Rebecca.
This was the tutorial that we were following along with. It really just deploys your first app, but just as keep this in mind that once you've deployed your first static web app and gotten it up and running, you're going to be doing most of your actual deployment through a terminal and through Git and all that kind of stuff. And we'll show what that looks like. It's really amazing how it links all this stuff together. It just makes it super simple to use. Cool. Okay, so quick start, good quick start to have. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll make this bigger in a second, but let me go ahead and just kind of get our windows all up and good to go. Okay, so this is our app running in the local context. I cheated, so well, actually here, let's just go ahead and do it, just so we can remind ourselves. So again, this is React app. This is our folder from before, so all the same stuff, nothing has changed. We're going to use the same thing that we did before to kick off the process of loading up the React app and letting us do hot reloads so that we can actually, do development in real time, see the changes reflected and whatnot. So I'm just going to kick this off with an npm start within the directory that we created the React app within. I already had this preloaded, but I was like, okay, I'll just go through and let's just get it up and running again. It's going to yell at me because I have this on a port already. So just to be expected. It used to be back in the day that when you had something sitting on a port already from the local environment, that it wasn't smart enough to kind of yell at you about this stuff. Yeah, see, yep, I already have stuff running. So let's run it on a different port.
Is there like a default port that it runs stuff on?
3000 is kind of the common one to run stuff on localhost.
Okay.
It just varies depending on project because you have a lot of ports available, but 3000 seems to. I'm sure there's a storied history. There's like
3000.
That port 3000. There's like a reason why port 3000 became like the default.
Was there an 8000 at one time?
Well, I mean, I think it was. I think isn't 8080 like one of the defaults?
8080s are the just a default like HTTP port, and then 443 is like the default HTTPS. But I thought local was like 8,000? No, maybe.
I don't remember. 3000 has now become one of the kind of like ubiquitous ones. But yeah, that'd be a fun one to go look into, just to dig a little bit into. But okay, cool. So let's go ahead and I'm going to actually, let's flip over into the app here for a second. So, all right. As a reminder, this is what our app looks like. Last time we got this use effect block in place, which goes and fetches our initial value. Yay, that's great. 150 from the database.
And we see the method of get. Nice.
Yep, the method of get. This is our local. So as a reminder, actually, and I can even flip over back into it, but we are running, do I have this up right now? Let's see. Woo. We are running the function app locally. So just as everybody following along, please get your function app running locally that we created before. This has all the routes that you'll need in order to actually do the testing from the local environment perspective. So these are all running nice and locally. But let's go back over here. Last time where we stopped was that we got the use effect block set up. We got the value coming in. We set up some initial state. As a reminder, this is what is holding your client-side state that is referenced. So we're actually storing 150 in this value called value. We created the scaffolding for a button, which is going to do something in the future, namely increment and decrement. And then we set up just some kind of basic styling. So why don't we go ahead and let me think of what's the first order of operations here. Well, we got the buttons here that say increment and decrement. So why don't we plumb those? Meaning, why don't we make those buttons actually start to do something? So what we want them to do is increment the value or decrement the value, depending on which button is pressed, right? Pretty simple. Nothing crazy there. To do that, why don't we first set up the actual methods within React that'll allow us to kind of plumb together that incrementing and decrementing piece. So let's go ahead and do that.
So in method, you're talking about like the post.
Yes. So, well, yeah. So there's two pieces here. So, and I'll kind of explain this as I go along. But like the two pieces that we'll need to do is one, when the button is clicked, it's going to actually need to like increment a value, right? And then it's going to need to send that value to the database to get stored. So, okay. And to do that plumbing, you have to do a little plumbing in React to make sure that the state gets, and because this is the way we've architected it, I'll explain kind of what's going to happen, but you have to plumb the value being updated on the client and the value being updated in this on the server, right? Because you want those to be synchronous. So the first thing we're going to do is just set up a little bit of logic, and this is going to be our what is known as a click handler in React. If you remember down here, we have this special thing called handle click, and then we set on button on click equals props.handle click. Well, this is the function that's going to get passed into this, and then React is just going to nicely handle that click event that occurs in the browser, and it's going to handle that because we're going to pass in a function called increment or a function called decrement, and I'll show you how that's all piped. But so first thing we'll do is we'll just set up a little bit of okay, we want to be incrementing, great. We're just doing a console log here, so we can just see the fact that the button was clicked and that we now know it's incrementing. And then we're going to use one of these special React component hooks called setValue, which we used up here to set the value from the response from making the fetch request to the API call, to the API endpoint. And we set the value from that call to that API up here in value, right? Because as we kind of talked about before, setValue in this case is a method that allows us to put a value into this parameter value. So this could be named anything, but we just happen to have it named setValue, which is great. But
descriptive.
Yeah, the important thing is like you have to set value sets a value inside whatever this is named. In this case, it's named value. And use state is the kind of special React-y thing that we're using to kind of make sure all that plumbing happens. So, and I'll actually be adding another piece of state here in a second, so you can kind of see how that would look to add more to it. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to increment the value that exists on the client side, which in this case is 150. We want to increment it just by 1, right? So we're going to go get the value from the client state, which we know is 150 at this point because that was the value that was set as on our initial page load. We're just going to increment it by 1. And that's it as far as the increment function goes. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to create a decrement function. It's going to have basically the fundamental same values, but we're going to say decrementing just because we want to, be able to see that happening. And we're going to do another set value, and this one's going to correspond to -1 because we're decrementing the value. We're decrementing value that we know is in the state of on the client by 1. This is going to make sense. So right now you're probably thinking, okay, well, that's fine and all. Like we're changing the value here, we're changing the value there, but like, how does this actually get up to
how to show it?
The actual the server, right? Like, how does it get up into CosmosDB itself?
Oh, and save the value. Like, so right now you're basically saving it. It's more of a cache, like a memory cache.
Yes, effectively, like these are being saved right now, like inside the just inside the browser state. It's just on the client. Nothing.
So if you reload it or you close off the app, come back in, it resets it basically.
Yep, exactly. So like, actually, I haven't. Yeah, these shouldn't do anything right now because we don't have the buttons plumbed. Okay, cool. So let's plumb the buttons though, and just see if we can get this doing what we expect it to do. So we have increment, we have decrement. These are not being used right now, but we can go down to our fun button handlers here, and we can do handle click equals decrement. So this is now pointing to this function we just created, this one down here, called decrement. So now what that means is that when this button is clicked, it should call this this function right here. Likewise, we will do increment. Same thing. When this button is clicked, we should see that value change. And now let's see, set value. Let's see. So feasibly, perfect.
Oh, there you go. That looks
so we can see
right away. It's really quick.
Yeah, it's the awesomeness of not having to actually
deploy,
not deploy, and also having to handle. It just, I mean, if anybody has worked with just vanilla JavaScript or event handlers or jQuery like back in the day, there's just so many little things you had to do in order to get like even this working, right? Yeah. And so React just made this, and single page applications made this so magic. Yeah.
So if you reload this page right now, will it go back to 150?
It will, just like that. Wow. And that's because this is actually the value inside the database, right? And this is only changing the state on the client. It's not doing anything else but changing the state on the client. It's also why it's so speedy, and you're going to see the difference here once we add a special function that's going to plumb all of this together. So that'll be fun. Okay, so let me think. Let's look through here. I think we got all that stuff. We're in good shape. And now it's time. Magic hand waves. Now it's time to add the magic sauce that's going to plumb this all together, and is going to require a little bit of an explanation. So up here we have use effect, which I mentioned before is a special React-y kind of method. The use effect block gets executed immediately on page load when you don't. Oh boy. Okay. The use effect block will get executed immediately on page load, meaning like all this code in here gets executed right away if you pass in an empty array value. And you're just gonna have to take me like, I'm gonna do some hand waving here, but like you're just gonna have to take me at my word that use effect takes in kind of it can take in a code block, and then it takes in a parameter. And one of the things is if you pass in an empty array, it's just telling use effect, go ahead and execute this code block right away. Okay. That's just, you can go dig into that on your own. There's lots of good docs on that to talk about why that's the case, but it is an important differentiation I want to mention here, because we're going to not be passing in an empty array here in a second with another use effect block we're about to create. So we just needed to really make that clear. If that's confusing, I apologize. It is kind of confusing when you don't understand the deeper details, but this is saying execute this code block right away. But for our special magic plumbing, we are going to be using use effect to get all this plumbing working in a certain way. So let's go ahead and create our use effect block. We're going to be doing something really, really similar, basically, to the previous block. Actually, nothing super crazy. There's a few things we'll change here and there. First thing I'm going to do is just throw a console log here, just because I like to get some stuff up and running, just so I can see that this is actually doing as I expect it to do. Next thing we're going to do, just like the previous block, is we're going to do a fetch. And in this case, We're going to be making a fetch to localhost 771 / API / update score. Name equals Funkiest API score.
So this is our website making a call to the API that we made in the first episode to do something.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, from the local context. And we're going to swap these out for the actual function app URLs towards the end here, but let's keep this in the local context first so people can actually.
I mean, if it works locally, then you most likely will work up once you deploy it in theory.
Hopefully, unless you get the endpoints wrong and then everything goes to,
true.
Kind of goes messed up. But just putting it nicely, I had a different thing I was going to say, but I'll try to.
Good catch, good catch.
Yeah. Okay, so I just added, basically, we're going to do a post method here. Again, this could actually be a put because we're modifying it, but I just chose to make it a post because I'm lazy. The difference is, there are some differences like with a get versus a post, but in this case, I'm doing this because we are going to post something in the body of the HTTP request. So I added headers, content type application JSON. This is just to tell the browser what to expect. Or sorry, this is just to tell the server what to expect. And now using the fetch, using fetch, we're going to pass something into our post request in the body. And what we're going to pass in this case is first we're going to stringify it, which just means send it as a string.
The response is right now is an array, so it's hard to actually read through it.
Yeah, so we're going to, I also like to just know that like what's getting from the client, I have an understanding, okay, this is getting passed as like 100% as a string. And if I need to parse it over on the server, I can. And so it's just more about like setting what that actual thing is, like setting the expectations for what's coming to the server from the client.
Yeah, and I've had that many time errors. Like I've had to break, wrong value or wrong format. I'm like,
yes,
stringify.
Exactly.
Stringify is your friend.
Yes.
Big friend in any JavaScript.
Absolutely, yes. JavaScript does a lot of fun things with with JSON objects and yeah. But anyways, that's an aside. So what I did here is I just stringified and I just sent in like an object, and all that this thing is doing is that it's an object that has the property num value, and then we set it to the value that is in our state right now. This corresponds to this. And so kind of as we were showing like this incrementing up and down, like this value, we're passing whatever this value is +1 basically, but you'll see that in a second. So we are just passing that value in and posting it to our API that will then insert that value into the database.
Okay,
yes. And so like as the state changes, the value in the database will change. And I'll show how that gets plumbed together in a second. But first thing we need to do is we need to actually capture all the responses. There's a JSON. Okay.
Always good to capture response, because then you know whether or not it actually went to the database and was successful, right?
Yep. We need to see all this stuff, and then we have to, and then okay. So and now finally, so this is just sending that in the body, et cetera, et cetera. And then once it gets the so there's kind of a fun thing that we're doing here, which is that we're actually on the client saying, hey, there's a value that we're passing up and we're incrementing it by 1. And then that new value is what's getting passed to the endpoint and put into the database. So what's going to come back out of the other side of the database from the response from the endpoint is that new value. And so we're doing the work on the client of incrementing on the client side and then saying, hey, just take this and update the database, as opposed to doing the work on the server side, which is like where we could do this, where it's like, hey, here's a value, add one, put it in the database,
then return it back to me.
And then return it back to me. We're not doing that. We're actually doing this, and we're doing this on the client in this case. And so this is where some of the magic comes in, because now when the response comes back out, the response should just be like the value, right? The value that we incremented, because it has been put in the database and it's going to send a response back out to us. And
with the same value, in theory.
In theory, exactly. Yes. So we're going to do set value response.data, which we'll go into our app and we'll show this in a second. But this should correspond to that new value in the database. And so we are now setting that value up here, right? We're setting that value as the response, which is going to be how these things get synchronized. So now if it was 150, like if we just refresh this, which we haven't saved this yet, but if this was 150, when we incremented it, it should now be setting the value to 151 from reflecting the value in the database. Hopefully I've pounded this point forward, because this is an important thing to kind of reconcile, is that we're basically just saying these two things are now in sync. Otherwise, when we incremented and then it returned a response, if it wasn't in sync, it would just flip back down to 150 or something else, which would not be correct.
So now that we're sending it to the database, it shouldn't update in the website till it gets a response back from the database, right?
That is absolutely correct. Yeah, feasibly, like because we are using use effect, it should increment. Actually, hold on. Let me think about the order of operations here. When you hit increment, it's going to set the value. The set value sets it to 1. There might be a bit of a race. There might be a bit of a weird. We'll futz with it. We'll try to break it.
We'll see what happens. Yeah.
A few
but
things.
these are things that to keep in consideration. Like, hey, it's not nice. Everything doesn't go down the happy path. You have to like try it out and see where it goes.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Also, I'm just checking something here. 1 second. Okay. Okay, cool. So coming back up here. I think that we did set we haven't done set initialized up here yet. Okay, sorry, I was just thinking through, because there's a couple of things we're gonna have to poke at here, but let's finish this one and then I'll add some of the flavor stuff in here. Cool, all right, back to this. Okay, back down. Okay, cool. So as I mentioned before, I wanna make sure that this doesn't, we want to go down here. That looks good.
Oh, actually, we have a great question, especially since we're talking about like checking things. Someone's asking, how easy is it to do a breakpoint or debug?
From a React perspective, like where we're at right now, it's actually pretty intuitive to do the actual like stepping through. It's funny, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like the last time that I debugged a React app, if I used breakpoints or not. So let me show you something really quick. I'm going to kind of hand wave some of this answer away, but I will show you that like React, one of the great things about React is that it actually has a super powerful set of tools called React Dev Tools. Specifically, it lets you go and kind of like interrogate like the state of your application. So this is the component view within React Dev Tools. It's also a profiler that shows you like the speed of the application as well. But this view is actually showing you the kind of the component tree of your app. And as you're clicking through it, you can kind of see like, let's see if this, you can see that the state is changing. And so like it's really useful from that perspective. It also shows you things like what your click handlers are. So handle click in this case is assigned to this button, which is the decrement button, and you can see that this is the decrement, handler. So it's actually super effective just to come in here and just poke around and kind of see what's going on. I think that there is, let's see, suspend the selected components. I think that there are like ways to set like the breakpoints. I have not done, again, I apologize, I haven't done it in a while to kind of step through the application state. I would imagine that's probably not a terribly uncommon thing to need to do. But generally, React makes it really easy to interrogate what's going on in your application state. So
I'll add that to the list for the next time. We can talk about it at our next session. They can just talk through like, hey, how do you debug or troubleshoot things like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Great question.
Agreed. Okay, so now what we're going to want to do is we have this like use effect block. Great. Now we got to add our fun argument that I was talking about before that has kind of slightly confusing, but we shall do it anyways. So I'm going to do a comma here, and where this would normally have been an empty array before, which would have said, hey, just execute this code block right away. Instead, with this one, and this is where all the fun React magic comes in, we pass in value inside these brackets. And what this tells use effect is, hey, if value ever changes run this code block. And this is really key, right? Because now useEffect is watching for the value to change. And so coming back down, coming kind of full circle on this, when I hit increment, we do a set value, which we set it to the initial value plus 1. Value then changes. useEffect then goes, oh, the value changed. I need to go run this code block. And as we know, this code block goes and puts that value into the CosmosDB database and then sets the value with the returned value back out. And then it goes, and then it stops. And it goes, okay, cool, we did it. Like we set the value successfully. And I'm not going to go run this again because I know that I did this. And that's the linkage, right? And that kind of completes the circuit because now we have incremented the value on the client. The client goes, okay, we have updated it. Here's the client state. We pass the client state via the body, and then we set the new client state as the response from CosmosDB, or sorry, from the API endpoint, which is the value from CosmosDB. And we know, like, we can say, cool, bulletproof. The client state and the server state are the same thing because the new client state is literally the value from the server. Does that make sense, Jen? Like, is that tracking?
Yeah. You know, that totally makes sense. And that's a good way to validate that your database and your client side are equal. Like, it should be the same in theory. Yep. Again, it depends on race factors, but that we can always talk about later.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save. Let's see. It failed to fetch on one of my things here. That is because, let's see. It's probably just
at least be a really good error message. You kind of know, it tells you exactly what the error is. Such a really nice error message.
Funkiest API.
So this could be like a breakpoint in a way.
Let me go through it. Let me see. Let me poke at this to see why this is happening here. Content type, update score. Why am this is not going to be a hard stop. I have a way to cheat our way through this, but I don't really want to cheat because I want to run this locally. So this is as good a time as any to flip back over into the function app then. So we can actually see what's going on here. So 71, update score. You know what? I wonder if my function app, let's kick this thing off again and make sure that my function app is actually running. It should be because we were getting the score, but let's just make sure. Let's see. Okay, so that's going update score, localhost 7070 API update score. Let's go ahead and look at the actual function app itself. So what we're in right now, we are in the function app. It's really hard to see. I'm actually gonna make this a bit bigger over here for a second while we debug this. This should all be happy. Should be doing its thing. We are in. So right now, I'll blow this up so we can see it a little bit. So we are in the update score function within the function app that we created before. Everything should be copacetic here. So I'm just looking through, making sure there's nothing I'm missing from s.name. That's all passed in. Okay, let's go back over. Everything looks okay there. This name HTTP. Oh,
don't you have to pass the value through?
No, hold on.
Oh, it's HTTP?
I was doing HTTPS instead of HTTP.
Oh, okay. So feature reference, like you should always use HTTPS, but
from the local,
for localhost is HTTP. It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't you love those those little tiny issues that kind of just hang you up? Okay, cool.
Great troubleshooting though. That's a good way.
Much easier to debug. Yeah, much easier to debug that. Okay, so I'm going to pause here before we go into. There's a couple other things we're going to have to do here in terms of doing some checking, in terms of like ways to not make this kind of go in an infinite loop. But first, we're going to have to go make a bit of a change on the function that we created before, which is why it was okay that we were flipping back into the function context. So previously, what update score did was this. And again, this is so hard to because of the way it's wrapping. Let me make this a little bit bigger. This was our old function. Just as a reminder, this is the function that updates the actual score inside the database. We have all of our credentials here, which is bad. Again, reiterate this 3 times now. don't store keys in plain text on your in your code.
It's okay for testing.
Particularly fine for testing. We have the CosmosDB SDK doing all of its things over here. Great. We are getting access to basically CosmosDB this way from the first episode. We have our query that we do. We are fetching the record based on the name of the record, which we passed in as a query param, which we are doing in our fetch request on the React app. We get all that. We get the record. We just set some data from the record into a couple of variables here. So here's the actual object, here's the ID, here's the score value. We were previously, so this is a change. This is what I wanted to show. We were previously incrementing this on the server, but now we're going to change that because we're doing it on the client, and we want to maintain that kind of client-server synchronicity and do it on the client side instead. It just seems like a nice
pass through the value from the client side, so
yes,
it's equal.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it probably would add another number, increment even one more, right?
Exactly.
They wouldn't match.
Yep, exactly. So this is actually not doing what we wanted to do. And so we simplified it. So you can see that we still do the things like we replace the item, all that kind of stuff, and then we send back the body. But in this case, let's go to our new. All the stuff here that I showed you before at the top, it's the same. All of this is the same. Like nothing has changed that much, except now we have one special new thing we've added. We have a new variable called new score value, and this is getting from the body, which we know we're posting in a value from the body from the React app. We're getting num value, which is that value we want to update the CosmosDB record with. And so we do that by doing score object, which is again the record from the CosmosDB database, dot score, which is the value inside that the record, and then we set it to the new score value, which is again passed in from the client. Then we go do our fun.
Previously, it said like the score plus 1, right?
Exactly. We had score plus 1, and then we would go and do the update, right? And now, we're just doing score value that's being passed in from the body.
Perfect.
And then we go and replace the record inside CosmosDB, just like we would normally do. We're not actually using this response message, so you can ignore that. It doesn't really matter. And then we are passing in the body the new value, right? Sorry, I should say the value from the CosmosDB database, which reflects the value we passed in.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so that's the modification you have to do on the function app side. You just do a couple of really just a couple of line changes, and then you're pretty much good to go. Cool. So that should all be working. Should all be happy. I'm going to go ahead and make this smaller again. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save again. Make sure everything looks okay. So yes, at this point, this thing is going to be freaking out. So in fact, it's freaking out so bad that I'm going to block that out really quick. Okay, good. So the reason why is that it's going basically on like an infinite loop right now, because of the way that this works is that use effect will get executed like once, and then it will go and watch the value. And so what we need to do is set up a few checks here to stop that from happening. And so the way that we're going to handle this is we're going to set a couple of special things in our state. This part, there's a couple different ways to kind of handle this issue. This is how I dealt with it. It's really dependent on who you are as a person. But in this case, in order to make sure that everything is working as we want, I'm going to create an isInitialized variable, which is going to tell our application that the web page is loaded and set a flag that says, okay, it has been initialized. And I'll show you how this all comes into play. But the first thing I'm going to do is just create it in the state. Again, this is just basically creating a piece of state with a function that allows you to set that state, and you do that in the exact same way as we did before. So you can see these are just my words. I'm literally just setting these, but use state is a special Reactism. What we're going to do down here in our previous use effect block is where once the response gets returned successfully, we have it, set value res.data here, right? But we're going to also add a handler called setInitialize, which corresponds to what we created up here. And we're just going to pass in the value true. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to set as a piece of state is initialized to the Boolean true. And this is now basically we have this piece of state that says is initialized equals true, right? Now it's like, cool, that could be useful for a bunch of things. Like, it's just nice to know that the app has been initialized. The page has been loaded. The data has been loaded successfully. It is now initialized. Is initialized equals true. Great. Now we're going to do something with that knowledge. So we're going to go back over to our we're going to go back over to our use effect block down here, and we're going to set up an if statement that is going to check to see if the app has been initialized. And we're going to do a couple of things here. Again, I always intended to hand wave over this, so don't get too kind of blocked by this. Again, there's a couple of ways to handle this, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to check to see if the type of value is equal to a number, which I'm just going to ignore for a second. And then I'm going to use is initialized equals true. I'm going to wrap this whole thing in this if statement. One second. Which is going to need to be down here. All right. Go ahead and make that thing a little bit better. Okay. Okay, so
you're going to set an is initialized to false when someone hits a button, then, I'm assuming.
Actually,
the
only time, so is initialized in this case, it's really just saying the use effect is going to run once and then stop, right? Like, that's just kind of like what it does. That's why this exists, because it just runs the code block but doesn't watch anything in this case with this array. It will, if you don't have like some sort of like an if statement or something, and again, there's multiple ways to handle this, and so this is not necessarily like idiomatic towards React. This is just my way of handling it, but there are other ways. I suggest, if you're interested in learning more, to read the React docs. There's a lot on this kind of topic. But this is basically just saying, okay, so run use effect, and then if the response successfully comes back, set initialize to true, then use effect will go and look and say, okay, is initialized equal true? Like, is it equal to true? And if it's not, meaning that the initial data has not been loaded yet, do not run this block, because like that doesn't make sense to run this block, right? Like, that's not a good thing to go do, because there's no data there. Nothing has been initialized into that state. And so this is just ensuring that this runs first, because this is an HTTP request, and so it's variable in the amount of time it's gonna take to kind of respond. And this is basically just dealing with that piece, is making sure that like our initial state is loaded.
We have values. Yep.
Yeah. Yes. And then great. Okay. Cool. Now we know it does have that value. So that's fantastic. And so this isn't really going to run on that first iteration, because it requires is initialized equal true first and foremost. This is just doing another gut check. This is basically saying, if there's no, I mean, I don't want to get too much in the nitty gritty about this, because this is doing a type check on like for JavaScript, but like this is just basically saying, oh, if the type in value is a number, then it's okay, continue on, like, because if there's nothing in here, it's not going to be a type of number. It'll be a type
null.
It'll be
which is not a number.
Which is not a number. So this is just doing another check in that front. Okay, cool. So now I can go ahead and save this, and what should happen here is I have all that set. That's all good. Let me make sure I have all of the stuff happening correctly down here. So value is initialized equals true. Refresh. That's working in the state side. Hold on a second. An API call, if type of value was number and initialized equals true. We're setting it down here. So value's good up there. This should be running. Do I have these reversed around? Set initialize equals true. Why are you doing this to me? Localhost. Sorry, I'm just poking through this, because this should be working. Type of value number is initialized equals true. Make an API call, post localhost. Yeah, this should just be running right now. Hold on, let's go ahead and kick this out really quick. Oops, 1 second.
Yeah, the other.
I wonder what's going on. Debugging live, my friends. Get it all the way out.
It should pull the data from the database, right? It should be like 150.
It should be, yeah, which is why I'm kind of poking at it right now. All right, let's go do some debugging here. Let's go see what's going on. Let's go to our network tab. Refresh up here. Score. Oh, see, nothing's coming back out of there. I wonder if weird. Let's go look. Okay, let's go interrogate this. Whoops. Also, thanks, Teams. Let's go interrogate our function app and see what's going on over here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger.
Hey, Skyler, it stopped sharing.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
That's fun. Okay, 1 second. Technical difficulties upon technical difficulties.
No worries. That's the fun of live sessions. Oh, we're back up.
We were so close. That's the thing, is that it's killing me. We were so close because, like, let's see. This should all just be, let's go ahead and refresh. You can see it coming through here. Let's go ahead and, all right, let's do this thing. Now you can see debugging happening in real time. Yeah, I know. So Jen, what I'm doing right now is basically I am going through the process of identifying why the data is not coming out of the CosmosDB database. It looks like everything should be fine. Let's go ahead and make sure that it's passing in what we expect it to be passing in.
Unless something, did it reset the CosmosDB? So it's like nothing?
Oh, because we were testing? That is a really good call, Jen. That is a really, really good call. That is very likely what happened. And I actually forgot. I knew about that. Okay, cool. That's a quick fix. We can get there. We have 7 minutes to do this. I believe in us. I think we can actually, we can do this. So
and, one of our viewers suggested a different way of writing the constant, which I think is a pretty clean.
Yeah, we definitely overwrote the values inside of here. Yeah. So I completely forgot about this. Yeah. So let's see. Rec.body score.score. So we now want, so okay, just FYI, doing something really nasty here.
Don't manually update a database ever unless you're testing
score.
Something.
So this should all be coming back out. Score, name still got set. That's good. Let's go ahead and update that to 0. Let's go back over into our function app. I know why this happened, but I'm not going to take the time to explain it unless I have time to actually explain it.
Oh, you got little squiggly red lines, by the way, under line 38.
It's because of this. Okay, so that looks good. Type of initialized. Okay, that all looks good. It actually has to do exactly with what I was talking about before. I shouldn't have even tested it because that's the thing that broke it. Okay, that's looking solid.
Now we got 0. Yay, we have a number.
Okay, so now feasibly, click increment. Oh, that was fun. Oh, it's because I set it to a string initially, and then now it's so I should have set that to an integer inside the database, but I set it to a string, and so but now it has changed the type. It's I won't go into why it did that, but in any case, we can see that this is actually incrementing up and down. This is plumbed to the database, and we can actually go and confirm that because we can we can actually see all these update score requests down here in the network kind of tab, and we can see the data kind of flipping up and down, which is great. So bump. You'll see these it's kind of hard to see down here, but these requests are updating. So like if we go to this one, it'll say 8. So awesome. So now we have all the code working. We have the value being updated from the being returned from the database and then being reflected on the client, and the client actually modifying it and then updating it inside the database. That's awesome. So this is all happening from the local context. Why don't we go ahead and actually deploy this thing so we can see this thing working end to end? We won't get to the fun styling, but I think we can make the deployment happen in time. So let's go ahead and try to get that up and running. I'm also going to, this is getting a little messy, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize. Can I minimize this? Yes, there we go. Okay. So first and foremost, I have this function app already running. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to take what I know to be the function app URLs, which you'll see here in a second. This is for our post request down here. I'm going to take this, I'm going to replace it. This is the actual function app URL, the Funkiest API v2. That is what we created before. That is for update score, correct. And then we're also going to take this over here and plop it here. Boom. Now we should be able just to save this, assuming nothing goes wrong. And then see that this is actually making the call to the function app now. That's great, just that quick. If we go to the headers, we can actually see that we are making the request URL. And now finally, that's working all on the client. That is fantastic. Nope, let's not do that one. Let's go ahead and grab this. Now we're going to go back to, again, as I mentioned before, this is why I teased this before. I want to make sure that we all have that context, is that this is from the static web apps. I know this is tiny, so I'll make this bigger. This is from like the static web apps context. Is that big enough, Jen, or is that still too small?
Yeah, it works.
Okay. I think I can actually make it even bigger. Okay, perfect. Because I did this from the static web apps context, what we can do is we already have the GitHub repo that we cloned at the beginning of the episode. And now we can just do we see that we've modified the app.js file. Great. Let's go ahead and do a git add, git commit. We can call this working end to end, I guess. Let's see. RPM, working end to end. We can do just a git push here, assuming that I have everything. Yep, okay, perfect. So I committed my change. I did the push to the repository. Sorry, what was that, Jen?
You have to save the index file before you do a commit.
I committed I added all my changes, and then I did my commit message, and then I pushed the change. So all of that, I did all of that. So git add dot, I just added all my changes and then did the git commit.
Okay.
So now we can flip over into GitHub. If I can sign in time. No, I don't. Let's see.
It's the Witty URL is the one that it's a live one. Witty Sky. Is that the correct one that we're going to be able to see this one? We shared it with
everyone. Yes, that should be the live one. So if you want to pull it up, but what I want to show, and I'm pulling up my authentication code here, 700253. Okay, cool. So we should be able to go into the Funkiest UI, go into actions. We'll see if we caught it in time. Let's see. Maybe that's not the Funkiest UI. Where is it? There it is. Updated 1 minute ago. Should be able to go into actions, see the workflow working end to end. Let's go into the build and deploy job and just see how this thing is kind of rolling through. So this is how it works with Static Web Apps, right? Is it sets up all of your stuff within GitHub. It's using GitHub Actions to do all these deployments. It's going through the process of actually compiling it and doing all that fun stuff and kind of getting it all ready. And then it's going to presumably build.
Build and deploy everything.
It got most of the way there. Is initialized. We did hit an error with the build, which is very sad because we were so close. We were one step away from getting this up and running.
Defense error.
It's initialized. I expect that I have a configuration flag that I did not flag, but we're not going to go into that. In any case, this is most of the way there. Perhaps maybe at the beginning of our next episode, Jen, I can quickly add like the last little tiny thing that might be missing to make this deploy. I don't think it would be worth our time to kind of go into why this exact piece is kind of breaking right now, but this should feasibly work. This has worked before.
Do we have the URL of the one that does work? You have one that's working, correct?
Yes, I do have the URL of the one that's working, and that one should be the one that I had open before, which was, I think, Witty Sky. Do you happen to have that link? It's the link that we had before.
Well, the Witty Sky, which just says hello world right now. So.
Oh, sorry. It was the one that I showed before. Here, I'll just pull it back up. 1 second. This is what the final. This is what we were progressing towards, and we were one step. We were so close, Jen. We were one step away from doing this, and of course, one thing had to go wrong. A few things had to go wrong, but
hey, live coding. That's what happens. It's okay.
This is true. Yeah, this is why you don't deviate from the script and try to show things that that you shouldn't show. There's little.
Yeah, but that's us. We there's always stuff that we go. Oh, let's talk about that.
This is true, actually, and it's worthwhile. Even with the I know we're at time, but even with that little kind of thing, I imagine that if people were trying to kind of test that iteratively before, they would run into that same thing. So I'm glad that we actually showed kind of the gotcha that you're going to get into with the DB by debugging that like that. So yeah, so I'd say on the subsequent episodes, as a bit of a follow-up, we'll go dig into why that is initialized isn't happy, but generally speaking, that should have been it. That should have just kind of flipped up, and it should have been reflected on Witty Sky, which is the other app, and we should have been good to go, having this work end to end.
And maybe we'll just do we can just do a recording later on, just a quick one to show fixing it and then getting it live, and then in our next episode we can go into actually like changing CSS and getting to the really fun part of, at least my fun part of websites and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I suspect that I suspect the issue is with a config issue, but yeah, definitely we can just kind of go more into that and show how to make that piece work. So
cool, awesome. Sorry guys, I know we were trying to get it done, but hey, this is live, so it's it's live at least.
Part of the whole experience.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much. This is great, and thank you to the audience for interacting. I think that you were able to answer all the questions that were in the chat. If you want to quickly take a peek while I do my shtick, you could do that. To everyone that's still tuning in, if you have the time, we ask that you submit a survey. We use the information from the survey to just kind of plan out content for the future through the Reactor. We like to know a little bit about you, our audience. So just go to aka.ms/reactor/survey and enter 14722. And that gives us takes you directly to this session's survey link. Also, if you are tuning in for the first time, if you've only just learned about the Reactor or about this channel, we are a community. We put out free content on a weekly basis internationally. So we hit a lot of different time zones. Depending on where you're tuning in from, there's localized calendars. So check us out, microsoftreactor.com. We are on Meetup. We have 12 physical spaces, so you can find a location close to you to check out. Right now, a lot of the sessions are still virtual, but we are hoping to be back in person as well in the near future. And you can find us on Twitter. And if you want a monthly email with just any upcoming things that we have up on the calendar localized to your region, aka.ms/reactor email sign up. I think that's it on my end. So thank you all. Skyler, Jen, did you have anything to add, or we're good here until the next one?
So Bruce had a question about the CosmosDB function. We'll post it on the video once it goes up on YouTube, or you can also reach out to us on Twitter.
Okay, cool. Bruce, let us know. Yeah. If you're still out there in the universe, let us know where you are tuning in from. If you joined through one of our Meetup pages, we can also drop that link over there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.